Hello to everyone and the internet. It is currently Woden's Day, January 16th, 2019. I am Nathan of Washington, and you are watching Culture Shock, the only show on the internet that knows how to separate an issue of culture from an issue of politics. This is the news. Okay, so St. Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne has been giving magic mushrooms to patients. And these are hospice patients. These people are dying. And they're basically dosing dying patients with psilocybin to eliminate anxiety and suffering. Basically getting high as a hospice practice. Seems perfectly ethical to me. I mean, you want to say that getting high hurts people. Well, who cares about hurting the dying? They're going to die anyway. Oh, long-lasting harm. Yeah, I mean, it's perfectly ethical to me. Currently, it's only, though, merely being a trial run, and trying this could change the way people depart from this world. They could be departing and passing on much more easily and with far less pain. They're just currently testing out to see if the effects of the psilocybin are what they appear to be, in eliminating anxiety and unnecessary stress. Personally, I say give them pot. That'll do it, too. Give them a bit of pot and give a full body high, and you can get them a little Northern Lights cannabis indigo, and they'll go out of this world with relatively little pain. Or actually, come to think of it, giving them drugs might intensify the pain. Ooh, whoa! I didn't even think of that, and I don't think they have thought about it either. You could actually be intensifying their suffering with drugs. Like it might make their perception of the pain even more intense. Yikes. I guess that's why you need to do trials before you actually do shit, right? You need to be sure it actually works. But I still see it as perfectly ethical, and if the patients consent to it, then hey. British school kids now too glued to phones to pay attention. Basically, the kids are too busy texting each other and hanging out on social medias to pay attention. Even some kids in their teen years take upskirt photos of female teachers and pass them online. Even some girls doing this, probably some lesbians in there. There have been literal parent-teacher conferences on the subject, so they are trying, and failing for now. They don't really have a permanent long-term solution. The current plan is to try and change the children's attitude towards education. Of course, they got to do everything the hard way. That's the hard way. Discipline would be far more effective. Here are some ideas on what I think you should do. 1. Confiscate the kids' phones when they come in the morning. Don't be too authoritarian. Don't be too forceful, but you just take the phones, lock them up in a box, and then they can claim them during recess or after school. For the grade school kids, for the high schoolers, throughout the entire day, no phones. Just lock them up and then you let them out, and then they can get their phones when they go home at the end of the day. And bring back some old school punishments or attention devices, like during tests, if a kid appears to be not paying attention, doing something they shouldn't, a teacher comes along, takes a ruler, and slaps it on the desk to get their attention. And makes them pay attention to the test. Right, just reinforce a traditional conservative approach. Without getting too severe, we don't want to go back to the days of like Elizabeth Bathory. Like, if you're not familiar, her school for girls, like her private school for girls, right? She would take the ones that were virgins and like bathe in their blood and shit because she thought it made her immortal. But the ones who weren't virgins, she would keep them at the school and continue to teach them. And she used all sorts of old school conservative methods from the time. And believe me, originally, they didn't just slap the ruler on the desk. They had you stick your hands out and they slapped the ruler on your knuckles. A teacher did that to me once when I was a kid. It fucking hurt. It don't feel good. So I think that's kind of pushing things a little too far. That's even a possible hand injury. But slapping it on the desk, get their attention. just sort of jar them awake or jar them to attention. That, I think, works. So go more conservative, but don't go all the way to like full-on corporal punishment. Scientists find evidence for another previously undiscovered race of humans from the early Paleolithic era. Part Denisovian and part Neanderthal. Now, if you're not familiar, Neanderthal were a race of humans that arguably, it is my personal belief that they're still around. In other words, white people. And Denisovians are basically Asians. But, of course, they want to push the evolution narrative. Because they're so desperate for evolution to be real, because they're so anti-creationism. Personally, I'm not on either side of that debate. But the point is that they found another one that had Denisovian DNA and Neanderthal DNA in its mix. Essentially what the Paleolithic equivalent of a Eurasian. Or a Eurasian. Eurasians have been a minority race that have existed for a long time. There are all kinds of tiny little kingdoms between Asia and Europe, along the Silk Road and other routes that lead to Asia. I think the character Kenshi from Mortal Kombat was supposed to be the descendant of one of those groups. The character model certainly looked it, because Eurasians have a certain look to them, like they have a more exotic. They have a more exotic look. Like they have light, fair skin, but they have more exotic features, generally. Also a very definite muscle structure. They look kind of scary. But what they're talking about would essentially be like a Paleolithic equivalent of that. Like, most people have, like, at least, like, something like an 8% Neanderthal component. Unless they're, like full-on, like, Sub-Saharan African. Then not so much. And a little bit of Denisovian finds its way into most people's DNA somewhere. Again, with the exception of blacks. From Africa. You'll find that in the DNA in black people from other parts of the world. Of course, that's because, those were descendants of slaves who their masters reproduced with. And so, there you go. So bottom line is they found another undiscovered race of humans from way, way back, and they have yet to really give it a proper name yet. And they obviously can't call it a Eurasian since that's name's already taken. I suppose you could call it a Paleolithic Eurasian, but that's a bit wordy. That's a bit wordy. I don't know. I don't got a good name for it, but the science on it is pretty clear. They found the full-on DNA, and it was from a detached hip bone. That's the oldest hip bone sample they found, over 400,000 years old. Wow. Science is great, ain't it? They found it in a cave in that region that is literally called Pile of Bones. Sounds like a lovely place. Anyway, speaking of reproductive things, police bust child sex slave ring in Florida. Now, this is somewhat editorialized and blown out of proportion, so I'll translate for you here. Police in Florida have busted some folks for, there are 7 pedophiles who had tortured and raped young children. One teenage boy was kept as a sex slave in a filthy trailer for over a year, according to police. We want to be clear, these adults preyed on these children, said St. Petersburg Police Major Mark Hansley. They will now answer for their crimes. BayNews9.com reports on Monday Mark Dennis 52, Andrew Dennis 45, Michael Schwartz 51, Michael Blasdell 36 Jr., Gauthier 29, and Eleanor McGlamory 56 were arrested on these charges of sexual abuse. The last suspect, Curtis Gruelle, 45, was taken into custody Tuesday morning when he turned himself into authorities. Mark Dennis, Andrew Dennis, Blasdale, and Gauthier were also charged with sexual battery with a child under the age of 16. Yikes. Police said the four men lived in a trailer at 4024 St. North in St. Petersburg, where they forced the teen to sleep on a small mattress on the floor. Lured with promises of a better life. Handley said the victim is from Marion County and met McGlamory, who then introduced the boy to the Dennises, a married couple. New Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody called this case an example of what she works daily to combat. The teenage victim in this case was lured away from his family with promises of a better life. Moody said instead he was moved into a filthy trailer and used as a sex slave for nearly a year. The detective said they discovered a trailer last May when Louisiana authorities asked officers to check on a 17-year-old boy who was missing. Officers found that boy, who said that suspects lured him on Discord, an online gaming app. It's not exactly a gaming app, it's more like a forum-esque chat room, really. Police don't believe that 17-year-old boy was sexually abused, but that's also when they discovered the victim, who had turned 16 years old by that time. The victim is receiving specialized trauma-informed care designed for victims of human trafficking and is thriving. The 8-month-long investigation was completed by the new St. Petersburg Police Heat Unit. Detectives want parents to monitor their child's online activity and who they're communicating with while playing online video games. So, in short, this guy was basically lured in. 16 is not a child, but rape is rape. This was someone lured in with the promise of a better life and then horribly, horribly abused. Personally, I think, honestly, if I was in charge, all these people would literally just be hung. I wouldn't even think twice. I would just do a public hanging. Get it over with, too, nice and quick. Get the bodies to swing a little, really make a point. Basically trying to use the kid as a sex slave, and they continued to do so for an entire year. I mean, that no matter how much therapy this guy receives at such a youthful time in his life, no amount of therapy is going to fix that. There's always going to be a residual trauma left behind. Poor guy. Poor guy. Can you even imagine a world where that kind of thing happens? And honestly, while Trump's wall will prevent sex trafficking through the southern border, it's really not going to stop trafficking and luring within the border. Because people who are native to North America, native to the United States, like Indians and white people, do it too. And even people coming down from Canada to the north sometimes do it. And of course you can't build two walls. Of course the wall is needed because there's multiple problems, and that's just one of the many that will be solved by it. But I think that the best way to deter this from being a thing is that you got to make the consequences so absolutely scary that any criminal would be too afraid to even dream of doing it. You got to make it real scary. I say start hanging them, and I say start doing public hangings. Show the bodies. Let the people really know and remind them powerfully what happens when you abuse others. And of course I'd also have them use DNA evidence to make absolutely certain the people were actually guilty. Don't just punish the wicked. Make a display out of it. Make it real clear. And for our final story today, I will now read you an article about anti-Trump propaganda in the mainstream media. Mainstream news networks ran 90% anti-Trump propaganda, a poll shows. Mainstream news networks in America ran extremely hostile anti-Trump coverage since 2017. Since January 20th, 2017, the Media Research Center has analyzed every piece of coverage of President Trump on ABC, CBS, NBC evening newscasts seen by around 23 million Americans every night. Newsbusters.org reports highlights. Point 1. Point 1. As it was last year, the Trump presidency was the biggest story of 2018, accounting for almost 87 hours of coverage, or 28% of all evening news airtime. That's down from 99 hours of coverage in 2017. Perhaps a sign the networks are wearying of treating every Trump tweet as deserving of crisis-level coverage. Point 2. The tone of coverage remains incessantly hostile, 90% negative versus just 10% positive, excluding neutral statements, matching the historically bad press we documented in 2017, yet despite the media's obvious disapproval, public opinion of the president actually improved slightly during 2018, from an average 40% approval on January 1st to 42.7% approval on December 31st, according to Real Clear Politics. Point 3. For the second year in a row, the Russia investigation was the single most covered topic amid the network's Trump coverage, garnering 858 minutes of airtime since January 20, 2017. The Russia probe has received 2,092 minutes of coverage on just the 3 evening newscasts. Good grief. I think this has pretty much exposed the fact that these news outlets, ABC, CBS, and NBC, are in service to the establishment. They are establishment shills. They are paid by the establishment to spew propaganda. That's how it would seem to me. A negative spin to determine the spin of news coverage. Our analysts, this is the details. To determine the spin of news coverage, our analysts tallied all explicitly evaluative statements about the president or his administration from either reports, anchors, or non-partisan sources such as experts or voters. Evaluations from partisan sources as well as neutral statements were not included. As has been the case since the president took office, the tone of network coverage has been exceptionally hostile, ranging from 82% negative on April 2017 after Trump was praised for a missile strike punishing Syria for a chemical weapons attack, to 96% negative in February 2018 when the news agenda focused on the Russia investigation, demands for gun control, and a White House aide accused of domestic abuse. I've got a neat little graph here. Damn. Yeah, the positive statement bar, it's low. Somewhere, it starts out somewhere between like 10 and 20, and yikes. Wow, they really hate him. Remarkably consistent, the 90% negative spin we calculated roughly matches what the Pew Research Center, not a conservative group, found in their study of coverage of Trump's first 60 days in office. They found 62% of network stories were negative versus 5% positive and 33% neutral. If you remove the neutral stories and look at just the stories with a clear spin, Pew's bottom line looks like ours, 93% negative versus just 7% positive. Harvard media scholar Thomas Patterson looked at coverage of Trump's first 100 days in office. He found NBC's coverage was 93% negative. CBS is 91% negative. ABC was not included. His study also found highly negative coverage from leading newspapers and CNN, while only Fox News offered balanced coverage, 50% negative versus 48% positive. The highly partisan media earns partisan reviews. The media's confrontational stance seems to have earned them greater respect among Democratic voters, of whom 76% say they trust the media, up from 51% in 2016. According to the most recent Gallup survey, by a meager 21% of Republicans say they trust the press, a near-record gap of 55 percentage points in how the press is viewed by voters of each party. The record was a 58-point gap in 2017. Prior to the age of Trump, this partisan gap never exceeded 40 points. TV's Trump agenda. More than half the Trump coverage on the broadcast evening newscast in 2018 focused on just 5 topics: the Russia investigation, immigration policy, the Kavanaugh nomination, dealing with the North Korean nukes, and the Michael Cohen hush money investigation. And the chart shows the network spent on all these topics was fiercely negative, ranging from 80% bad press on North Korea to 99% negative on the Cohen hush money story. What about the shutdown? The partial government shutdown was the top Trump topic in December, garnering 67 minutes of airtime that month, or about 1/5 the total Trump coverage. Note that this figure also includes negotiations prior to the start of the shutdown, December 21st. And at least in December, nearly 97% of the evaluation of Trump's handling of the impasse were negative. In ordinary circumstances, this onslaught of negative publicity would cause the politician on the receiving end of it to reverse course. But the established media have been so reliably negative towards his president for so long that the effect of their criticism now seems to be virtually nil. As noted above, Trump's job approval ratings actually rose slightly last year despite all the negative coverage. The media elite have clearly waded into the political fray to wage war against this president. But have they accomplished anything beyond cementing their reputation as political partisans, not objective journalists? So in short, it's just a Trump hate bandwagon. Because Trump is anti-establishment and these news outlets are establishment shills. And the establishment does not like their power being challenged or undermined, not even by the president. And so, of course, the mainstream media is going to be against him. And since the establishment is mostly liberal, of course, they're also going to be against the very, very conservative Fox network. Anyway, that's it for Culture Shock today, folks. I'm out.